They never seem to take ownership. They never seem to take any kind of true, meaningful accountability. It's even pulling teeth to get a simple "I'm sorry." You might notice that your avoidant partner or your avoidant ex always seems to dodge accountability. They're always projecting their behaviors as if it's not their fault. Maybe it's your fault. Maybe it's work that's too busy. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But they're never saying, hey, this is me, I own this. And if they do, it's in a way where they're still trying to skirt full accountability. And you are hurt. This person has pulled away from you. Maybe they discarded you. Maybe they pulled the rug from under your feet. Maybe they cheated on you, did some sort of behavior that really crushed you. But they're not taking accountability. And then when you look at it, they've never taken accountability for anything. And it's so incredibly frustrating. So why don't they take ownership? Why don't they ever just tell you that they're sorry? There's a few reasons for it. If you're dealing with an avoidant, and a dismissive avoidant in particular, or a fearful avoidant that leans heavily dismissive, there's a core wound of shame. And that wound of shame is what keeps them from taking accountability. Shame is different than guilt. See, people often confuse the two, but guilt is actually a healthy emotion, because if you feel guilt, well, it means you have a conscience, but it's your brain's way of saying, I did something wrong, and there's a potential resolution to guilt. You could make amends if you hurt somebody, or you could stop repeating the behavior that you feel guilty about. But whereas guilt is, I did something wrong, shame is, I am something wrong. I am broken. I am defective. I am worthless. Shame is a toxic emotion, and there's no resolution to shame. So there's this core wound of shame, and it comes from that consistent childhood emotional neglect that the avoidant experienced. They personalized it, growing up to feel defective, unlovable, worthless, like they're just broken and defective. So now as an adult, taking accountability, well, that would mean confirming their own inner shame. For a healthy person, you need to take accountability to grow and learn from your mistakes. I did this wrong. This is how I can do better. But in the mind of the avoidant, it's I did this wrong because I'm defective, because I'm not lovable, because I'm worthless. It confirms that defectiveness, and it's too painful. So what they look to do, and their subconscious mind automatically does, is to project their fears, their behaviors onto external things. It becomes somebody else's fault, your fault. It's work's fault. It's my family's fault. But it's never their fault, because if it's not their fault and they can do the mental gymnastics to justify their behaviors or fears, they don't have to take accountability, which means they get to avoid that core wound of shame. They don't have to poke on it. And avoiding is what they do. Anything that's unpleasant, anything that's painful, negative emotions, any kind of introspection, they avoid it because of that core wound of shame. It's all based on avoiding that core wound of shame. Plus, taking accountability, taking ownership, that's being vulnerable. That's opening up and saying, I'm wrong. Vulnerability actually brings people closer together. Emotional closeness and vulnerability feels unsafe to them because of that core wound of shame. Their subconscious fear is, if I lower my walls, my partner, and my partner gets behind my wall, and my partner gets into my heart, my partner's going to figure out that I'm defective. I will be exposed as being worthless and unlovable. They'll reject and abandon me when they figure out that I'm not good enough. But emotional distance feels safer because that way they can keep the partner on the other side of the wall and protect themselves from being exposed as what they believe themselves to be, which is unlovable, defective, and worthless. So emotional closeness feels unsafe, and apologizing, taking ownership, taking accountability brings closeness. It fosters closeness. It brings vulnerability. It brings emotional intimacy, because conflict resolution brings people closer together. But for the avoidant, taking accountability and building that closeness is too much of a risk. They prefer the emotional distance, and no apology, no accountability helps maintain that distance. So it is profoundly difficult for them to take accountability because it's too much vulnerability, and it requires self-reflection, which is something that they generally avoid doing due to that core wound of shame. But because of that lack of self-reflection, they often have a complete lack of self-awareness, not knowing why they do what they do, not knowing why they feel the urge to push a partner away, generally blaming external things. Well, my work is just too busy, or this person's just too needy, or if they were the right person, I wouldn't feel that way. But anything to escape that inner accountability, because taking accountability with you isn't really the fear. It's taking accountability within themselves and confronting that inner shame that is too painful and they don't want anything to do with it.